I call it Phragmipediums the Michael Phelps of the orchid world, because, buddy, they love water, they like it wet, they grow fast, and they're long-lasting. These are some of the different frags, as Pam alluded to. This is some of the frags that I have awarded. What are they? They're part of the Phragmipedium family, so they're related to paths, Phragmipedium, Phragmipediums, which are native to Kentucky. They're a cousin of that, and Mexipedium are from Mexico. And they're related, like I said, paths, frags. Where they're from is northern South America. They were described in 1846. I'm not going to get a whole lot into that. I will tell you that they do grow terrestrially, so they grow in the junk that's on the ground. They grow on trees and actually grow on rocks. So they're pretty varied in what they do. The bottom says that they only breed with their own genus, which is not really true. Most people think that. They have been crossed with paths. Not very many of them. I thought there was only one. And I thought that one, which was done back in, I think, the 60s, was a mistake. So in doing my research for this program, I got on the RHS site, and in fact, that's been done 7 times. So there are a few Phragmipediums out there. And this shows a little bit about what was used in making that particular one there. And they do pick up characteristics from both.
2 slides back, you said there was epiphytic and lithophytic, or lithophytic?
Lithophytic, yeah.
What is lithophytic?
Lithophytic is growing on rocks.
Growing on rocks.
Right. So a lot of them will grow in South America. They're growing on cliff faces that I always tell everybody, if you drive down 75 and go through Kentucky, that you have these places where the water is running down, where they've cut through the mountain. That's the exact kind of place a lot of them are growing in South America, natural habitat like that. And if you do want a question, go ahead and ask me, as I'm going through it. And if I don't see it, just, wave your hand a little harder like you did, and I'll pick it up.
What's the temperature they need?
Excuse me?
Temperature-wise, do they survive?
Most frags grow intermediate, so they're in that, I'll say 60 to 90 range. They kind of like it 70 to 80 and there. Frags do not like it very cold, with one exception. Frags, I have taken frag blooms in weather almost maybe a little colder than this. Just taking them out to my vehicle is enough to get them to, by the time I get to my destination, it's knocked them off. So they don't like any 30-degree weather. They don't like it. And they will also, if you get them wet and have them in 30, 40 degrees, that's one ailment that will show up. The leaves start getting funky. One of the reasons I also like frags is they're very durable. They don't get many diseases. Not many bugs like them. But cold, wet water is one that they don't like very much. They like water, just don't like cold water. Yeah. And then frags are broken up into 6 sections. As we go through this real fast, you'll kind of understand the 6 sections. The Phragmipedium section of the Phragmipediums are the ones that are really big. They're going to be, plants can be like this tall, or foliage can be probably this tall off the floor. Flower spikes can be like that. They're going to be green, and they're going to have petals probably a little shorter than that. The Phragmipedium is going to be the same kind of a green thing, but it's going to be the short ones. They're very short. Plant like the green hornet, Carcinium, they're going to be a very short plant, could almost grow them on your tabletop, but they're going to all be green, and they're going to have petals that kind of go down. The Platyopedilum is going to be, they all have some red in it, and the platy part is kind of because the petals look a little bit like paddles. They're kind of wider, where most frags, the petals taper to a point. Lorifolia is haven't seen your moment. I'm going to skip that. Micropedalum is going to be all the pink ones. It's going to be things that are related to that. And then the brand new one, which is the Phragmipediums, is a purple guy, got its own class, the Shuckabiera. So, as we go through these species real quick, you'll kind of see where this is going. Andrettiae actually falls into the pink family. It's like a Schlemmii, but kind of white. Bessiae, which was actually found by a teacher named Mary Bess. And that's the orange ones. Those were found. This kills me. Thing grows, it's neon orange, grows right out in the open on a cliff face, and it's not until the 1980s that anybody discovers it. You can see it from, like, hundreds of yards away. Bocerina, I call this one the horse because this thing gets big, big green plant. Brasiliensis is a kind of a relative of that, fairly new. Carcinum is one of the tabletop guys. They stay pretty short. And all these like a lot of water with exception of one. And when I get to that one, I'll tell you what that is. It's that one, Claudatum. Anything that's got, see the dorsal? They have that dorsal. They got that big dorsal that hangs down. And then they have the longest petals of them all. And it's used a lot in breeding to give the long petals. This guy likes it a little bit drier. Still likes water, but not quite as much water. Christianium, said that wrong. Another shorter guy. This is another big one in that Phragmipedium group. Delisandroid is like a Bessiae, but it has pointed petals. Staminodianum, which actually does not have a staminode. I have not found out how this even propagates itself without a staminode. It's something I have to do a little homework on. But as you can see, it's also a relative of Claudatum. It's got the big long petals, and those petals can approach 24 to 30 inches. Fisheri, Parkwegii, Hertzii, there's another small one. Humboldtii, which you can see the dorsal again, so it's part of that same family. The big long ones, like I said, if you get into frags, as you're picking them out, if it has a big dorsal on there, whether it's a hybrid or not, you want to know that it takes a little bit less water. Because all the other frags, I'm not kidding, you could water 4 or 5 times a day.
Are they finicky about the water or the pH?
They're finicky about the quality of the water. pH isn't so much, but they want to have clean water. Like softened water will do them in a heartbeat. So you want to have pretty pure water.
I've always asked this question and I never get a really good answer why some leaves, the edges are brown on
The
frags.
leaf edges or the tips?
The tips, edge.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because that's one of the first things that a frag will do if it doesn't like the water. If it doesn't like the water, the leaf, because the impurities in the water will show up in leaf tips. And frags being pretty sensitive to the water, that'll tell you that it doesn't like the water. You either have too much parts per million of something in the water, or maybe that we talked earlier, if the media has gone south, then that plant is actually taking up things that it doesn't want, into its system. And that shows up in the leaf tips. I liken orchids to people a lot just because of their personalities and some other things. But one of the things I say that they have a circulatory system like a person. There's actual, like veins and arteries in there, and the smallest ones are in the leaf tips. So like a person that would lose fingers or toes because they have diabetes, because there's things going through those arteries that clog up in the fingers and toes. The same thing happens with the orchids. So if you've got impurities that the plant doesn't like, they're going to show up in the leaf tips first. So that means you either have, you know, bad water, or the medium has broken down, that it's not taking up good clean water. As part of my little demo here, when these things are growing by waterfalls, rivers, seepies, they're always getting fresh water. This is a little thing, I gave a talk in Asheville on Frag. I didn't want to do that. Just to show the water running down the face. This little plant's popped up 3 growths on it just since I put it in there, because it really likes that. I mean, some of the best frags I've grown is when I've grown in a hydroponic table. And that table was set up. Now I have too many plants, so I need a really big table. But it would water 3 times a day for 15 minutes. So it would flood the table, and then it would drain the table. Now, some people will grow frags sitting in water, and that's okay, but I prefer to have the water running. The running water, because there's another buddy of mine who grows some really good frags, it's kind of about the oxygen. It's kind of like a fish tank. You have the aerator in the fish tank to oxygenate the water. When you have running water, it oxygenates the water rather than water that's just sitting someplace. So it gets fresh water, it gets oxygen to the plant, and it likes that. So the orchids, you know, need good water and fresh water. It's a long answer to that question. Caturarium, that's in the paddle group. Clostridium is another little guy. Cavachii, this is the one, you know, made a big stink. This was discovered, I think, late 1990s. I actually know Michael Kovach. There was a lot of trouble that went on with that. He was walking a roadside between Ecuador and Peru, and a roadside vendor was selling these things for like, I don't know, it's 50 cents a plant, something like that. He recognized this as a frag, takes the frag to Florida, presents it to Shelby Gardens to have it identified. They say, yes, this is a brand new species. It gets named after him. The U.S. Department of Agriculture like arrest him because he's taken this plant from Peru, Ecuador. You know, when you're walking a road in the jungle like that, which side of the border are you on? There was a lot of stink that went on. That people already knew that this plant existed and were trying to get it described and stuff, but he kind of stumbled into beating him to the punch. It wound up keeping his name. He got something like a $500,000 fine and a couple years supposedly in jail. Now he's dead, but it was that thing is as big as your hand. I mean, it's a very big frag, and of course with that color, which is we've seen lots of green and a little bit of pink, but this color is, you know, pretty purple. And of course, when you get a new thing like that, you got to breed it to everything else that exists so you can see what it does. But it's pretty neat. But one has one bad trait. It kind of has floppy petals, so they tend to open up flat, and then they start aging really fast. They get floppy, so they don't look quite as pretty. Lindenii, this is the one that does not have a pouch. It's related to Claudatum. These things are kind of rare, but it's really pretty interesting because the pouch becomes actually another petal. So instead of having 2 long petals, you got 3 per plant. Lindenii, the paddlepellum group. Longifolium, this is used a lot in breeding too. This actually adds stamina and floriferousness because this thing, as you can see, can grow to be a big bush, and all those little bracts on there, because a lot of frags are sequential. Back up. All those little bracts are flowers. So most frags are sequential. So most of them bloom one flower after the other. Depending on the group, like the pink ones don't do as many as the big green ones. The big green ones, I mean, you can have an inflorescence blooming for, a year. And so when you get multiple inflorescences on them, they can become something that's never out of bloom because it just keeps going and going and going. But this one's used a lot in breeding to bring those traits to it. Manzurii, which is another Schlemii type. Piercii, this is like the little guy. The longifolium is the big green guy. This is one of the little guys. As you can see, that'd be pretty nice to have sitting on your table. Yeah. Reticulatum is another big one. This one has a little bit more undulation along the syncypal and petals. You can see that all going around there. Richterii is another small one. That's a natural hybrid. Sargentianum. This one has a lot of red to it, so a lot of them that have red in it have Sargentianum in the background. Schlemii, as you see, comes in some forms. That one is sequential bloomer also, but it will only produce 4 or 5 flowers instead of the all year long thing. But that one's cute, and that one stays short also. This is newly described Tetralaphianium. It's a shorter version of the taller big plant. This is another new one. Viditum has a little bit of red to it. Walsii is yet another, the dorsal in the Clodatum family, as is this one. The hybrids, this is just a couple of the hybrids. Sorcerer's Apprentice by Humboldtii. So you can see, like Grande, they did the longifolium and then the Sargentianum, so now they have something that has a boatload of flowers that's red. Sorcerer's Apprentice has the longifolium by Sargentianum, so now you have, a little bit of twist to it with some red. Clodatum, they're bringing in the long petals on both of these. And now we're starting to get some interest with the pink ones, that they're not all just little cute guys. You cross that with longifolium. It's like this one here. You start to get some twist to the petals, and there is color variation between those. Schroederii, that flower is about 8 inches tall. The Clodatum has made it bigger. Eric Young is the Bessier, which that's actually one right here. That was one of the first ones when they found the neon orange guy on the side of the cliff. They started, breeding it with some other stuff to bring that orange in, and that's brought a lot of color in. And there's color variation. This one here is one of the most awarded frags because of the bright red, the even shape, and that one blooms 7 or 8 flowers on a stem. Jason's Fisher. That one's got a lot of awards on it too. It's pretty well proportioned. This another one's got a lot of awards. Indian Fire. Bessier by Lindianum. So it's the orange by the red. And then as things go, the crosses get a little bit more complex. That one, believe it or not, is from a pink one. And now we start doing Cavachii. So Cavachii start bringing size to all of the flowers. So most frags you can see are kind of smaller or medium size. So we start hybridizing the big one that's 5-6 inches across, like the Bessier up there. The orange one got a lot bigger, and then the petals got a lot fuller. Peruvian Royalty, that one was actually at the Cincinnati show. That flower's every bit of that big. I think that took best of show at a couple of shows. But like I said, I want to, I know what I brought my notes and didn't even read them. But what it would say, it's just going to talk about the different species and where they grow. It grows on cliff faces, grows by rivers, grows by seepage. That's a word that they like to use a lot. Seepage being just, wet ground. But and some of these are actually, they're growing by rivers, and they're the river floods and they're underwater for weeks, if not months at a time. So water is, a big thing with frags. That's really what makes them, that's the trick to growing them. I try to water mine every couple of days. I mean, you can go once a week, but if you want your best performance out of a frag, you want to water it a lot. If you can water it every day, it would like that. It'll produce better for you. They don't require very much fertilizer, because once again, if you're just getting a lot of water, you're not getting a lot of fertilizer. Things that require fertilizer, I liken them to terrestrial plants. Anything that's growing in the ground where stuff is rotting, that's going to be a lot of nutrients. So they don't, they get some obviously through the water. I'm not going to say don't fertilize them, but they don't require fertilizer. I mean, it's like cattleyas and vandas and stuff like that, I think they're kind of heavy feeders. I liken the Phragmipedium to one of the lightest feeders. It does not need a whole lot of food. What it needs is water. It also needs air movement, because one of the things, if you're watering like overhead a lot, what they won't like is if you get water in the ground or in a brack and it sits there, then that'll rot. So you want to make sure that they get some air movement. And I try to keep a lot of air moving on the frags. I also say, this book was just put out by Guido Brahm. He's a very good taxonomist. He writes about frags. This is a very good book. I don't know how many people know Eric Sauer up in Dayton, Ohio. Eric wrote the culture side of this book, so it tells how to take care of them.
We had them here once.
Yeah, but this is a great book. I love it. I got this as a present for my wife, and it's only been out for about maybe 6 weeks. And Guido Brahm has a website, what's it called, Guido Brahm Books or something like that, so you can actually buy it from him, and then you can have it autographed on here somewhere. There it is. But as far as what you grow them in, another thing I tell a lot of people, we had this discussion, you can grow an orchid in anything. I mean, back in the old days, you go to Kmart and buy dendrobiums in lava rock. I mean, it was like lava rock, and now we have the hydroponic rock. I know guys that grow frags, which like water, in rocks, but they water them a lot. Some of those guys, they like to do the thing where they put a couple of holes in the bottom of the pot so that there's always water in the bottom of the pot. That kind of follows the school of growing in sitting water, which I'm personally not a big fan of. I'd like to see the running water. But mixes vary. Frags don't mind their potting, I'll say that. Unlike a Vanda, which is like you did that to a Vanda, be crying for a year. This is a very coarse mix. Perlite, a little bit of charcoal, and bark. Because I like the water a lot. I like the air to get in there. This frag, which I just acquired, I picked up a collection from somebody that's a very good grower. It's just straight, big bark. I mean, that's, really big bark. So it's not, and like I say, and I know guys that grow them in sphagnum. I'm kind of not so much of a fan of that. That keeps them wet. But sphagnum has I'll call it a shorter shelf life. It breaks down faster. And it's fine as long as you don't pack it so tight that they don't get any air to it. So my thing about the growing of the frags is not so much about what you pot it in, it's about how often you water it. You got a plan. Go ahead.
So you're saying that if you water them every day, it's not necessary to have them sitting in the bottom?
Right, you don't need to have them sitting in the water. Now, because I mean, you kind of referenced some of the Hawaiian growers. In Hawaii, some of the growers that grow frags out there, it rains every day. They do not grow in a greenhouse. They grow in a shade house, which a shade house is going to let water through.
Right.
You know, but what they do get out there a lot is wind. They get air movements. So it's all about the wet, dry, well, I mean, just, you know, we talk about that all the time in the working world, but it really, frags really like it. So you can just drown them in water, as long as you got air movement to dry them off. That's really what makes them happy. You can sunburn them. You know, they like some sun. They're kind of in between Phalaenopsis and Cattleya sun. And so if you sunburn it, we have a sunburn plant. I know we sunburn some. Now we're like trying to work on the greenhouse. So we move everything outside. You know, the sun starts over here, winds up over here. So the angle of the gun is changing all day long. So I know there's a couple of them got sunburned because, you know, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, that window between the trees, it just nailed it, you know. So they like some sun, but they can get sunburned, and probably crown rot from watering with not any air movement, and cold water. That's about the only 3 things that really ever have problems with. So if you don't sunburn them, and don't crown rot them, and don't let them get cold water, they grow really good. I mean, they grow fast. Like a Cattleya or a Path, I mean, it can be, you know, 7 years from the time you take one as a seedling to it blooms. Frags are more like 2 to 3 years, so they're a much faster grower. They can become specimen size a lot faster. Most bugs don't like them. Never really have any scale on them at all. The thing that will occasionally you get mealy bugs on them. They'll get, if you got mealy bugs around and they find some buds, you know, they like that. So I'm trying to think if I've had slugs. I might have a slug bite a spike or 2 here and there. So, but they're really, like I said, it's, you kind of was like the secret. The secret is just lots of water. So I don't know if you have any more questions.
The Bessie type, the Dick Weber, Paragon, Station Bishop. I don't have talked with anyone except for that group. Is there something really thinking about that group more than others, or is it just they don't like my mom?
The Bessier group?
Yeah.
Not really.
No.
No, I mean, I grow the Bessiers right with, you know, all the green ones and not. Now, I did say the one, the Cavacii, now the Cavacii like it a little bit cooler. Because the Cavacii, yeah, I know we're not talking
I have
about
4 of them, and they're all with the other ones, and they're all having this stupid Bessie eyes give me a way to go, and I don't know why. I do them all the same. I have no problem with the Raja, just the Bessie eyes.
It's supposed to be the other way around.
I know.
Raja are the ones with the,
No, the Cavacii is the purple one.
okay.
The purple
That's right.
one, that one likes it colder because it grows up higher in the mountains as far as elevation. And really, when you're in northern South America, you're in the equator area. It really has to do with what elevation it's growing at that dictates the temperature, because they're not really having any change of season.
Is there anything like Phalaenopsis or whatever where they get cold and they'll strike? Is there any
Not really. Frags will.
change?
Frags do. There's some frags that kind of are seasonal. Most frags will bloom just about any time of the year. I would say if there was a low time of the year, it's going to be like around the winter time. But they're pretty much a mature growth and bloom. Because like I said, they're not seeing, growing on the equator, they're not seeing much seasonal difference.
So they're like, does the length of the day,
Yeah, see, the day length is almost the same.
okay.
You know, and that's actually I mean, it took me many years for that to really dawn on me. You know, we buy a lot of orchids from all over the world, and we could put up grow lights and all this stuff. It's like, hey, some of this stuff doesn't see much change. Anything that's growing around the equator is really not seeing much change. You know, so, you know, I give talks on growing under lights. I tell people to 18 hours in the summertime and 12 hours in the wintertime. Well, there's some plants that really don't want to do that. You're like mixing them all up. You know, they want to see something more equal all the time. You know, but frags are one of them that's a mature growth is what gets them to spike. You grow them good and healthy and they'll just spike all the time. I mean, it's like you saw the longifolium. Once those get going, they're never out of flower. You know, once they start getting some size to them, they just don't stop blooming.
The ones that take less water, how do you handle them?
Well, those I would probably just basically not water them as much, or some people are growing them in baskets so that they get more air than something growing in a pot. And then instead of watering it like every day, you can water, you know, twice a week. So, you know, where twice a week sounds like a lot of water, that's less than, you know, once a day. I had a guy that actually he lived here in Kentucky. When I did it was you know. Anyway, so there was a guy in Newport area. I do the Cincinnati show, and he would buy flasks from Sam Suey of frags. You know, well, he's just a guy that likes frags. Well, you know, you get 40 frags in a flask. I don't want 40 of the same thing. So he would grow these and come to me and say, hey, why don't you sell these to Joe and we'll, you know, split the profits kind of thing. So he's bringing me these frags, and they're like horses. It's like, what are you doing to these frags, Hans? He had taken a 6-inch pipe, put it like on an angle, put pots down in, he drilled holes in it, and put the frags down in these pots, and put it on to where there was a slump pump down here, and he grew under lights. So he had this thing set up that the sump pump would come on when the lights come on, and yeah, so the water would drain down, and it would fill up the thing, and then it would start pumping again, so it would cycle all day long. I'm like, so how many times a day is that water in your plant? Oh, yeah, 6-7 times a day. That was my first thing, and that was years ago. It's like, there's something to this, because his plants were just so big and robust. And then I put in the hydroponic table, and I saw that things were just growing crazy. But my hydroponic table was about this big, and I had like 30 frags in it. Now we have, you know, 300 frags. And I've got a bigger table, but I have yet to put it up. This table is 12 feet long and, you know, 5 feet wide. So.
Do they do well in the modified hydroponic where you have to use the clay beads?
Yeah, you can use the expanded clay pellets.
They go okay with that?
Yeah, they do fine with that. Like I said, I know some good growers that grow with that. I mean,
So you can flush that. I mean, you can flush that every day.
right. And it's, I mean, that's almost a little bit better in the hydroponic table because when you're running, like if you have a bark mix and you're running that much water through a bark mix, it will break it down a little bit faster, you know. I would never do sphagnum in a hydroponic table because that's just going to keep them soaking wet all the time, you know. One other thing I want to say is things that, like this guy right here, and the Bessiers, if you have them in spike during cooler weather, they're subject to some cooler weather versus the summertime, the colors will be more intense. So you get like darker reds and deeper oranges when things are blooming. So, and that's always good to know. One of the guys I know, he'll snap all the spikes off if it starts in the summertime because he doesn't want it. I'm not quite there yet. Then I'm going to start just cutting spikes off because I don't like the color. You know. So.
Did you bring any white ones with you?
Any what?
White ones like in your slides?
I did not. I don't have any of those.
Oh,
And
of course.
that Well, the Andrettier is a relatively new discovery. It grows in a pretty small area somewhere up by Columbia, so it's like the natural collection is pretty small. So they're kind of just coming out. They believe it's one guy even says it's a Fisher eye or a Schlemmy eye that because it's growing over there, it's kind of washed all the color out. But, and then the Phragmipedium, which is a cousin of that, that's the baby frag, which is all of about this tall. That's the only one that's in its genus. Are a little bit hard to come by and hard to grow. I don't know as much about those. I've not grown one of those yet. All I do is hear people complain about growing them, that they're, huh?
I was hoping you had this.
Yeah,
What do people complain about with those? I have a little one, and
a little frag.
a little Mexipedium.
Well, that they're, well, I mean, you should get up here and start talking about that.
No, but I mean, it's
Well, that
just growing, and I just want to know.
well, the rhizome is long, so when it produces a new plant, it's pretty far away from the other plant, so they can get kind of leggy really fast. You can't cross them with anything. You would love to cross that little white guy with some of these. I mean, it's a cute little flower, but I've just heard it's hard to grow. Like I said, I haven't dove into that, and they're not really very available.